They told me no leave when I requested 4 days to bury my father. My name is Philip Harmon, 43 years old, Director of Enterprise Contracts at Meridian Solutions, a mid-sized technology consulting firm in Denver. 12 years I had managed every critical client agreement, vendor relationship, and proprietary contract template in systems I personally built and administered. Sandra Bishop, our HR director, looked at my bereavement leave request that Tuesday morning and delivered 5 words that changed everything. No leave. Deliver the report or you're done. I sat across from her in that sterile HR office, my father dead for exactly 6 hours, and watched her highlight sections of the employee handbook like she was grading homework. Sandra, my father died this morning, I said, keeping my voice level. I need Wednesday through Saturday to drive to Wisconsin, handle funeral arrangements and support my mother. Company policy provides 3 days bereavement leave for immediate family, she replied without looking up from the handbook. Your request is for 4 days, which exceeds standard allowance by 1 day. 3 days barely covers drive time. The funeral is Friday. I need 4 days to handle this properly. Sandra closed the handbook and finally made eye contact. Philip, I understand this is difficult, but we have the quarterly contract report due Friday. You have significant deliverables this week. Policy is 3 days. Take your 3 days or request vacation time for the additional day. I haven't taken vacation in 8 months. I'm asking for 1 extra day to bury my father. Policy is policy, Sandra said, and her tone shifted to something colder. We need to maintain consistent standards. No leave beyond the 3 days. Deliver the quarterly contract report by end of business Friday or you're done here. Those are your options. I nodded slowly, feeling something shift inside me. I understand. Good. Submit your choice by end of day. I walked back to my office, closed the door and sat at my desk for 10 minutes staring at nothing. Then I opened my laptop and began the most methodical 4 hours of work I'd ever performed. By midnight, every contract worth $3.8 million in annual revenue would be behind encryption only I could unlock, and Sandra Bishop would learn what happens when you threaten the wrong person during the worst day of his life. Have you ever made a decision so calculated that the execution felt like routine administrative work rather than career-ending confrontation? My role at Meridian Solutions had evolved over 12 years from basic contract administrator to something far more central to operations. I started in 2013 managing vendor agreements and client service contracts, the foundational work nobody notices until something breaks. The previous contract manager, Patricia Chen, had retired without proper documentation. On my first day, the operations director walked me to Patricia's old office. Patricia kept everything in her head, he explained. Files are scattered. Backups haven't been tested in years. We need you to figure out what we have and organize it properly. Did she leave any documentation about processes or systems? Some notes. Mostly you'll need to reconstruct everything from source files. I spent my first 18 months rebuilding our entire contract infrastructure from chaos. Files had inconsistent naming conventions. Contracts were stored across 3 different servers with no centralized tracking. Backup systems existed, but nobody knew if they actually worked. By 2015, I had built a centralized contract management database with proper version control, automated renewal tracking, and encrypted backup protocols that actually functioned when tested. My supervisor at the time, Gerald Foster, reviewed my work during my annual evaluation. Philip, this is excellent work. You've created systems that actually make sense. Thank you. But we should implement redundant access protocols. Right now, I'm the only person with master administrative credentials. That's a single point of failure. Gerald nodded. You're right. Let's budget for proper succession planning next quarter. That conversation happened in 2015. The succession planning never materialized. Budget priorities shifted. Other projects took precedence. Years passed, and I remained the sole person with complete administrative access to contract systems representing growing percentages of company revenue. By 2018, I owned master passwords for every critical system. I had exclusive administrator credentials for the contract database. I maintained physical custody of original signed agreements stored at our secure document facility. I had designed the infrastructure specifically for security, with multiple layers of encryption and authentication that required my direct involvement to access. Philip, "You're the only one who really understands this infrastructure," the operations manager told me during a system review in 2019. "That makes me nervous from a business continuity perspective." "I've been recommending redundant access protocols for 4 years, I replied. "I can train backup administrators anytime management wants to prioritize it. I'll bring it up again with leadership. But honestly, everything works so well under your management that it's hard to get urgency around it." That was the fundamental problem. The systems worked perfectly, so management never addressed the vulnerability until it became a crisis they couldn't fix. Sandra Bishop joined Meridian as compliance manager in 2022. She was 47 years old, had worked in regulatory compliance for financial services, and approached HR policies like they were federal regulations requiring rigid enforcement. I first encountered her inflexible style during a company all-hands meeting 3 months after she started. "We're implementing stricter leave approval processes," Sandra announced. "Too many discretionary exceptions have created precedent problems. Going forward, all leave requests will be evaluated against written policy standards with consistent application regardless of individual circumstances." A sales manager raised his hand. "What if someone has unusual circumstances that don't fit standard policy? Then they request vacation time or unpaid leave. Policy exists for a reason. Consistency matters more than individual accommodation." Several employees exchanged concerned looks, but nobody pushed back directly. Sandra's message was clear. She valued policy compliance over human judgment. I had minimal interaction with HR during normal operations, so Sandra remained a distant administrative figure until that Tuesday morning in April when my father died, and I discovered exactly how inflexible her consistency standards could be. My father, Robert Harmon, was 68 years old when he had a massive heart attack while working in his garden. My mother called me at 8:30 Tuesday morning. "Philip, your father collapsed. The ambulance is here, but he's not breathing. They're trying to revive him." I was driving toward the office when she called back 15 minutes later. "He's gone, Philip. He died before they got him to the hospital." I pulled over on the shoulder of I-25 and sat there for 20 minutes trying to process that my father was dead. Then I called my supervisor, James Mitchell, the operations director. "James, my father just died. Heart attack this morning. I need to drive to Wisconsin tomorrow to help my mother with funeral arrangements. Philip, I'm so sorry. Take whatever time you need. Family comes first. We'll handle things here. I'm thinking Wednesday through Saturday. That gives me time to drive there, coordinate with the funeral home and support my mom through the service." "Absolutely. Just submit the formal leave request through HR and take care of your family." I assumed the approval would be automatic. Bereavement leave for a parent's death seemed like the most straightforward HR situation possible. I submitted the request through our leave management system, noting the relationship and expected absence duration. 2 hours later, Sandra Bishop called my extension. "Philip, I need you to come to my office to discuss your leave request." Her tone was administrative rather than sympathetic, which should have warned me what was coming. I walked to HR and found Sandra with my request pulled up on her screen. The employee handbook was open next to her keyboard, several sections highlighted in yellow. "Have a seat," she said without looking up. I sat down across from her desk while she reviewed the handbook like she was preparing legal arguments. "Your request is for 4 days, Wednesday through Saturday. Company policy provides 3 days of bereavement leave for immediate family members. Your request exceeds policy by 1 day. Sandra, 3 days barely covers the drive time. Milwaukee is 15 hours from Denver. I need the full 4 days to handle arrangements and support my mother. Policy is 3 days for immediate family. Parents qualify as immediate family, so you're entitled to 3 days. Can we extend to 4 days given the circumstances? My father died this morning. I haven't seen my mother in 6 months. She's alone in Wisconsin dealing with this." Sandra shook her head. "We can't make exceptions that create precedent for other employees. If I approve 4 days for you, then everyone will expect 4 days regardless of policy. Consistency matters. This isn't about creating precedent. This is about my father dying and needing time to handle it properly. I understand this is emotional," Sandra said, her voice taking on the patient tone people use when explaining simple concepts to difficult children. "But we have business obligations. You have the quarterly contract report due Friday. That's a critical deliverable that the executive team needs for board meetings next week. The board meeting is Wednesday. The report isn't due until Friday. I can handle it when I return. Philip, let me be clear about your options. Sandra leaned forward with both hands flat on her desk. Take 3 days bereavement leave as policy allows, or request 1 day of vacation time to extend your absence to 4 days, or deliver the quarterly contract report by end of business Friday as scheduled. Those are your choices. And if I take 4 days and don't deliver the report by Friday? Sandra's expression hardened. Then we'll need to discuss whether this position is the right fit for you. No leave beyond policy. Deliver the report or you're done here. We need to maintain consistent standards. I sat there looking at her highlighted handbook and her rigid expression and understood that this woman had just threatened my employment 6 hours after my father died, because policy compliance mattered more to her than basic human decency. I understand your position, I said quietly. Good. Submit your final decision by end of day today. I walked back to my office, closed the door and sat at my desk feeling something cold and clear settle into my thinking. People who deny you time to bury your father while threatening termination don't deserve access to systems only you control. Sandra had made a calculated decision to demonstrate her authority over employee requests, regardless of circumstances. She had chosen this confrontation deliberately, using my father's death as an opportunity to enforce her consistency standards. I opened my laptop and began working through the most methodical security lockdown I had ever implemented. First, I transferred every contract file from our shared document management system to encrypted external storage. 1,800 contracts representing $3.8 million in annual revenue, copied to drives with passwords only I possessed. The transfer took 90 minutes, running through secure protocols that left no electronic trail. Next, I changed every master password for our contract databases. The credentials I had maintained for 12 years were replaced with complex passwords I memorized, but would never share without negotiated compensation. Each system required separate authentication, and I changed them all: the contract management database, the vendor portal system, the client relationship tracking software, the automated renewal notification platform. Then I accessed our backup systems and changed the recovery credentials. The encrypted backups I had designed specifically to protect against data loss now protected that data from everyone, including Meridian Solutions itself, because only I possessed the authentication keys to restore access. Finally, I submitted paperwork to our secure document facility, requesting temporary custody of physical contract originals for quarterly audit purposes. This was a routine request I had made dozens of times. The facility staff processed it automatically, loading 43 boxes of original signed agreements into my SUV by 6 p.m. Tuesday evening. By midnight, every contract, every backup system, every access credential, and every original document for $3.8 million in annual revenue was secured behind barriers only I could unlock, and I had left no electronic trail explaining what I had done or why. I went home, packed for Wisconsin, and went to bed knowing that Thursday morning Meridian Solutions would discover they could not access any contracts needed for operations, and Sandra Bishop would begin learning what her 5 words had actually cost. Have you ever prepared for consequences so methodically that the execution felt like routine administrative work? Wednesday morning, I loaded my car and started the 15-hour drive to Milwaukee. My phone rang at 7:40 a.m. James Mitchell, my supervisor. Philip, I'm so sorry about your father. Drive safely and take care of your family. Thanks, James. I'll be back Monday. Wait, Monday? I thought you were taking through Saturday. I need 4 days for the funeral. It's Friday afternoon in Milwaukee. Did Sandra approve 4 days? I thought policy was 3 days for bereavement. Sandra and I discussed my options. I'm taking the time I need. There was a pause on James's end. Okay, we'll figure it out. Focus on your family. I drove through Colorado and Nebraska, listening to audiobooks and not thinking about Meridian Solutions. My father was dead. My mother needed me. Sandra Bishop's policy enforcement would reveal its consequences without my involvement. Thursday morning at 9:30 Mountain Time, while I was crossing into Iowa, the operations team at Meridian discovered they could not access any enterprise contracts needed for client renewals scheduled that week. James Mitchell called the IT director, William Chen. William, I need you to pull the Baxter Industries contract. Their renewal is Friday, and I need to verify terms before the call. Give me a minute, William replied. 5 minutes later, William called back. James, I can't access the contract database. The credentials aren't working. What do you mean the credentials aren't working? The system is asking for authentication that I don't have. Let me call Philip. Philip is driving to Wisconsin for his father's funeral. Don't bother him with this. There must be backup access. William spent 30 minutes attempting every recovery protocol. Every attempt failed at authentication steps requiring credentials he didn't possess. James, this is a problem. I can't access the contracts. The backup systems require authentication through devices we don't have. Philip designed these security protocols, and he's the only one with master access. Can you bypass the security? Not without risking permanent data destruction. Philip built bank-grade encryption specifically to prevent unauthorized access. It's working exactly as designed, protecting the data from everyone who doesn't have his credentials. James called Sandra Bishop at 10:15 Thursday morning. Sandra, we have a situation. Philip has the only access to our contract systems, and he's not responding. We need contracts for client meetings, and we can't get them. What do you mean he has the only access? Philip built the contract infrastructure. He's the sole administrator. Nobody else has the credentials to access anything. Then use the backup systems. The backups require Philip's authentication. William can't bypass the encryption without destroying the data. Sandra's voice took on edge. Where is Philip right now? Driving to Wisconsin for his father's funeral. Call him. Tell him this is urgent and we need him to restore access immediately. James hesitated. Sandra, his father died Tuesday. He's burying him Friday. Maybe we should wait until... Call him now, James. This is a business emergency. James called my number at 10:23 Thursday morning. I was at a rest stop in Iowa having coffee with my mother on the phone, discussing funeral home options. I looked at the Meridian number on my screen and declined the call. James left a voicemail. Philip, it's James. We have an urgent situation with the contract systems. Nobody can access anything. Please call me back as soon as possible. I deleted the voicemail without listening to completion and went back to my conversation with my mother about whether the funeral should be Saturday or Friday afternoon. Sandra Bishop called my number directly at 11:07 Thursday morning. I watched it buzz while sitting in my car at the rest stop. I let it go to voicemail. Philip, this is Sandra Bishop. We need you to restore access to the contract systems immediately. This is urgent. Call me back. I deleted that voicemail too and continued driving. By Thursday afternoon, the crisis at Meridian was escalating. 3 major clients needed contract verification for renewals due Friday and Monday. The operations team could not locate original agreements. The digital copies were inaccessible behind encryption. The quarterly report Sandra had demanded could not be generated because all source data was unreachable. Sandra called my number 16 times Thursday afternoon. I ignored every call. The CEO, Richard Dalton, convened an emergency meeting Thursday at 4 p.m. with James Mitchell, William Chen, Sandra Bishop and the General Counsel. Explain to me why we cannot access our own contracts, Richard said. William answered, Philip Harmon built our contract infrastructure over 12 years. He designed security protocols with multiple layers of encryption and authentication. He's the sole person with master administrative credentials. Without his authentication, we can't access anything without risking data destruction. Where is Philip? Wisconsin, James said. His father died Tuesday. He's attending the funeral Friday. Richard turned to Sandra. Did you approve his bereavement leave? He requested 4 days. Policy provides 3 days. He had critical deliverables, including the quarterly contract report due tomorrow. Let me understand this correctly, Richard said slowly. The only person with access to 55% of our revenue operations requested leave to bury his father, and you denied it while threatening his employment. I enforced policy consistently, Sandra replied. He exceeded standard bereavement allowance and had critical deliverables. And now we're facing operational crisis because the only person who can access our contracts is unreachable at his father's funeral. The conference room was silent. Richard looked at the General Counsel. What are our legal options? Limited, the attorney replied. Philip has legitimate administrative authority over those systems. He checked out physical contracts through proper procedures. He changed passwords using privileges we granted him. There's no theft, no breach of duty. He simply exercised the access we gave him. Can we threaten legal action to force him to restore access? We could, but that's complicated by the fact that Sandra denied his bereavement leave in circumstances that could appear callous if examined externally. If we threaten him, he could make this very public and very ugly. Richard turned back to Sandra. How many times have you called him? 16 times this afternoon. He's not answering. Keep calling. Authorize whatever settlement is necessary to restore access before we lose clients. Sandra called my number 21 more times Thursday evening. I was having dinner with my mother and sister at a restaurant in Milwaukee. My phone silenced on the table, watching it light up with each ignored call. Have you ever watched your phone record someone's desperation in real time while you focused on the people who actually mattered? Friday morning, I met with the funeral director at 9 a.m. to finalize arrangements. My father's service would be Friday afternoon at 2 p.m. The same time Sandra Bishop would be discovering that her policy enforcement had created consequences far beyond anything she'd calculated when she threatened my employment. At Meridian Solutions, Friday brought compounding crisis. The Baxter Industries contract renewal worth $900,000 annually was due by close of business Friday. The client contact, Thomas Baxter, called James Mitchell at 8:30 Friday morning. James, I need the updated contract for our renewal. Our legal team needs to review it before we can process payment. Thomas, we're having technical issues accessing our contract files. Can we get you the documents Monday morning? Our fiscal year closes Friday. If we don't process the renewal today, it goes to our board for approval, which delays everything by 6 weeks. I need the contract today. I understand. Let me see what I can do. James had nothing he could do. The contract was behind encryption only I could unlock, and I was preparing my father's eulogy in a Milwaukee hotel room. 2 other major clients had similar situations, contracts needed for scheduled renewals that couldn't be provided because nobody could access the files. The quarterly contract report that Sandra had demanded was impossible to generate. All source data was inaccessible. The executive team couldn't present contract metrics to the board without the report Philip was supposed to deliver. William Chen brought in emergency IT contractors Friday morning, specialists in data recovery and security systems. They spent 3 hours examining our contract infrastructure. The lead contractor delivered his assessment at noon. Your director of contracts built military-grade security, multiple encryption layers, 2-factor authentication through devices he controls, recovery protocols requiring credentials only he possesses. We can't bypass this without destroying the underlying data. Even if we could crack one layer, there are redundant protections we'd trigger. Whoever built this knew exactly what they were doing. Can you get us access by end of day? Richard asked. Not without the administrator's cooperation. This isn't amateur security. This is someone who understood exactly how to make systems impenetrable. Richard looked at Sandra. How many times have you called Philip? 41 times since Thursday afternoon. He hasn't answered once. Where is he right now? His father's funeral is this afternoon. Richard's expression showed what he thought about the situation Sandra had created. Keep calling. Tell him we'll negotiate whatever he wants. We need access restored. Sandra called my number 19 more times Friday. I was at my father's funeral from 1:30 to 4 p.m., phone completely off, focused on honoring a man who had taught me precision, proper planning, and the importance of documentation. The service was exactly what my father would have wanted. Dignified, well-organized, attended by people who respected his work and character. I delivered the eulogy about his 42 years as a mechanical engineer, his dedication to doing things correctly rather than quickly, and how he had taught me that proper preparation prevents problems. My father would have appreciated the methodical preparation I had executed Tuesday evening, the systematic lockdown of critical systems, the comprehensive transfer of access to secure locations, the strategic patience to let consequences develop naturally rather than forcing confrontation. After the funeral, back at my hotel at 6 p.m., I turned my phone on to discover 61 missed calls from Meridian numbers, 27 voicemails I didn't bother listening to, and 16 text messages ranging from urgent requests to barely veiled threats about employment consequences. I deleted everything without reading the complete messages and went to dinner with my family. Saturday morning, the crisis at Meridian reached critical mass. Thomas Baxter from Baxter Industries called Richard Dalton directly. Richard, We didn't receive our contract renewal documents Friday. Our fiscal year closed. The renewal now requires board approval, which won't happen until our November meeting. That means a 6-week gap in our agreement. We're exploring other vendors for the interim period. Thomas, we had technical difficulties. I apologize for the delay. Can we get you the documents Monday and expedite your internal approval? Our CFO is questioning why we're working with a vendor that can't provide basic contract documentation on deadline. I'll discuss it with our team, but no promises. 2 other major clients delivered similar messages Saturday. The contract access crisis wasn't just causing delays. It was threatening client relationships that represented millions in recurring revenue. Richard convened another emergency meeting Saturday morning with the executive team, Sandra Bishop, and General Counsel. This situation is unacceptable, Richard began. We're facing potential client losses because we can't access our own contracts. Explain to me exactly how we reached this point. The room was silent until James Mitchell spoke. Philip Harmon has been recommending redundant access protocols for 5 years. Every annual review, he noted that concentrating all access in one person created business continuity risk. We never prioritized fixing it because everything worked perfectly under his management. And on Tuesday, Richard said, looking at Sandra, when Philip requested leave to bury his father, you denied it while threatening his employment. I enforced bereavement leave policy, Sandra said defensively. 3 days for immediate family. He requested 4 days and had critical deliverables. Did it occur to you that threatening the only person with access to 55% of our revenue during his father's funeral might create exactly this situation? How was I supposed to know he would lock us out of everything? You weren't supposed to know because it shouldn't have been necessary to think about. When someone requests leave to bury their father, you approve it and express sympathy. You don't threaten their employment. The General Counsel interrupted. Our immediate priority is restoring access before we lose major clients. What will it take to get Philip to cooperate? He's not answering calls, Sandra said. 61 attempts since Thursday, complete silence. Then someone needs to present an offer compelling enough that he'll respond, Richard said. What do we think Philip wants? James considered the question. Philip is strategic. He doesn't make emotional decisions. If he's staying silent, it's calculated. He's letting us understand the full scope of what we created by concentrating all access in him and then threatening him during personal crisis. So what's his price? Probably substantial compensation for transition services, full severance and consequences for the person who created this situation. James didn't look at Sandra when he said it. Richard nodded. Draft settlement terms. Generous consulting fees, full severance package. Written acknowledgement that he operated within authority. And Sandra, your position is under review pending resolution of this matter. Sandra's face went pale. I was enforcing policy. You created operational catastrophe through failure to exercise judgment. Whether that's terminable offense depends on whether we can resolve this before it becomes company-ending crisis. Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m., I was having lunch with my mother when my phone buzzed with a call from Sandra Bishop, her 61st attempt to reach me since Thursday. I looked at my mother. That's my former employer. They've been calling for 4 days. You haven't answered. They told me to deliver work or I was done when I asked to bury Dad. I took them at their word. What happens to them now? They're discovering what operations look like when the only person with system access isn't there. I answered the call on speakerphone. Philip? Sandra's voice was strained, desperate. Thank God. We need to talk about... Sandra, I'm in Milwaukee attending my father's funeral. The event you denied me adequate leave to handle properly. There was long pause. Philip, I understand you're upset, but we have a business emergency. We need you to restore access to the contract systems. What happened to deliver the report or you're done? I chose option 3. Done. I'm no longer your employee. Philip, please. This is serious. Clients are threatening to leave. The board meeting was delayed. We're facing operational crisis. That sounds like a business problem. I'm dealing with a personal crisis. My father's death. Surely you understand that policy takes priority over individual accommodation. Philip, what would it take for you to restore access? Let me think about that and get back to you. I ended the call and went back to lunch with my mother. 20 minutes later, Richard Dalton called my number. Mr. Harmon, this is Richard Dalton, CEO of Meridian Solutions. I understand you're attending your father's funeral, and I want to express my sincere condolences. Thank you. I also want to apologize for how your leave request was handled. Sandra's decision was wrong, and it's created a serious situation for everyone involved. I appreciate the apology. Philip, I'll be direct. We need you to restore access to our contract systems. What would it take for you to help us resolve this? I'm glad you asked. Let me outline what I'm thinking. $150,000 paid as consulting fees for restoring access and providing transition documentation. My immediate resignation with full severance package, including 1 year's salary at current compensation rate. Written acknowledgement that I operated within all granted authorities and committed no policy violations. And Sandra Bishop's termination for catastrophic failure of judgment that created operational crisis. Philip, I can't promise an employee's termination as part of our settlement. Then, good luck restoring access without my help. Enjoy your client losses. Wait, let me think about your terms. Can you give me until tomorrow morning? You have until 9 a.m. Monday Mountain Time. After that, my consulting rate increases to $250,000, and I start entertaining offers from your competitors who might be interested in hiring someone who understands your entire contract infrastructure. That's not fair, Philip. You're holding us hostage. No, Richard. Sandra told me to deliver work, or I was done. I chose done. Now you're discovering what done actually costs when the person who's done controlled everything you need to operate. That's not hostage-taking. That's business continuity failure you created by concentrating access in one person and then threatening him during his father's funeral. I ended the call and spent Sunday evening with my family, not thinking about Meridian Solutions. Monday morning at 8:30 a.m., Richard called back. Philip, I've discussed your terms with our board and general counsel. We agree to the financial terms, $150,000 consulting fees, full severance including 1 year salary. We'll provide written acknowledgement of your authority, and Sandra Bishop will be removed from her position as HR director for decisions that created this situation. Put it in writing. Send the settlement agreement to my personal email. When I receive signed documents, I'll restore access and provide complete transition documentation. Can you restore access today? We have critical client situations. When I receive the signed settlement agreement, I'll restore access within 2 hours. Have your legal team work fast. The settlement agreement arrived at 11:20 a.m. Monday. I reviewed it carefully. Every term I'd specified was included. Sandra Bishop's termination was characterized as personnel action addressing catastrophic failure of judgment in critical employee management situation. I signed electronically and returned it through encrypted email. Then I logged into Meridian systems remotely from Milwaukee and began unlocking everything. I uploaded new credentials through secure channels, restored backup access, and provided comprehensive documentation of all access procedures, system administration processes, and contract locations. At 1:45 p.m. Monday, I sent Richard an email confirming all access was restored and attached 90 pages of transition documentation. His reply came 15 minutes later. Access confirmed. Thank you. Your severance and consulting payment will be processed this week. Again, my condolences about your father. I closed my laptop and went for a walk with my mother through my father's favorite park in Milwaukee. Have you ever resolved a crisis on exactly your terms because you held every key and they held nothing but consequences? The aftermath developed over the following weeks. Sandra Bishop was removed from her HR director position on Tuesday, 5 days after denying my bereavement leave. The company announcement characterized it as organizational restructuring to address business continuity protocols and employee relations processes. Sandra called my number Wednesday evening. I answered because I was curious what she would say. Philip, I know we didn't part on good terms, but did you really need to get me fired? Sandra, I didn't get you fired. Your decisions got you fired. You denied bereavement leave to the sole person with access to majority revenue operations while threatening his employment. You created foreseeable operational catastrophe through failure to exercise basic judgment. Those were your choices. I was enforcing policy consistently, and consistency cost you your career. Policy enforcement without judgment isn't leadership. It's abdication of thinking. You had the authority to approve 1 extra day for someone to bury their father properly. You chose to threaten them instead. Those consequences are yours, not mine. You're vindictive. No, Sandra, I'm strategic. There's a difference. Vindictive would have been destroying data or creating permanent damage. Strategic was securing access. letting you discover what you'd created, and negotiating fair compensation for fixing your mistake. You're confusing consequences with vindictiveness." She hung up without responding. The settlement payment arrived Thursday. $150,000 for transition consulting, $78,000 for annual salary severance. Total compensation of $228,000 for 4 days' work, restoring access and providing documentation I should have been creating anyway through proper succession planning. Job offers started arriving within 2 weeks. My reputation in Denver's technology consulting industry was enhanced rather than damaged by the situation. People understood I had been treated poorly and had responded strategically rather than emotionally. "Philip, I heard what happened at Meridian," was typical conversation at industry networking events. "Sandra Bishop denied your bereavement leave and you locked them out of everything? That's cold-blooded excellence." "I didn't lock them out," I would correct. "They locked themselves out by concentrating all access in one person and then threatening him during personal tragedy. I just declined to fix their mistake until they compensated me fairly." Silverton Technologies, a Meridian competitor, reached out with director position offer in July. The compensation was $165,000 annually, $32,000 more than Meridian had paid. The benefits included generous bereavement leave, robust succession planning, and leadership that understood business continuity required redundant access to critical systems. "Philip, we want you to build our contract infrastructure properly from day one," the Silverton CEO explained during my interview. "That means distributed access, documented procedures, and multiple administrators who can handle operations if any one person is unavailable. That's exactly how it should be done. Single points of failure are business risks that eventually fail. What happened at Meridian? They concentrated 12 years of system access in one person, never implemented the redundancy I recommended repeatedly, and then threatened that person's employment when he asked for time to bury his father. They discovered expensive lessons about business continuity and human judgment. Their loss is our gain. When can you start?" I accepted the Silverton position and started in August. My first project was implementing the distributed access protocols I had recommended at Meridian for 5 years, ensuring no single employee controlled operational continuity the way I had. Not because concentration of access was operationally wrong, but because I never wanted another Sandra Bishop to have the opportunity to threaten someone during personal crisis and discover what that threat cost when directed at the person holding every key. At Silverton, I built contract infrastructure with 3 administrators who each held partial access. Complete system control required 2 of 3 administrators working together. If any one person was unavailable, vacation, illness, bereavement, operations continued smoothly. "This is how you prevent the Meridian situation," I explained during training with the other administrators. "Nobody should control everything. If management ever treats you poorly during personal crisis, walking away shouldn't threaten company operations. Business continuity and human decency shouldn't be mutually exclusive." The lesson was professional, not personal. Single points of failure eventually fail, and companies that build operational dependencies on individual employees without redundancy deserve the crises they create when those individuals withdraw cooperation. 6 months after the settlement, I ran into James Mitchell, my former supervisor at Meridian, at an industry conference in Denver. "Philip, how are you doing?" James asked, seeming genuinely pleased to see me. "Well, Silverton is excellent. Better compensation, better culture, better leadership. I'm glad. What happened at Meridian was wrong. Sandra created that crisis through terrible judgment. How are things there now?" "Different. We implemented all the redundancy protocols you had recommended for years. 3-person admin team, distributed access, documented procedures. The transition was expensive and time-consuming but necessary." "That's good. Better late than never. The board asked me to tell you if I ever saw you, that they understand what happened and don't blame you for how it resolved. I appreciate that, but I wasn't looking for blame or absolution. I was looking for fair compensation for services rendered and consequences for decisions that created the situation. I received both. Sandra's reputation is ruined in Denver HR circles. The story spread fast. HR director denies bereavement leave, creates multi-million-dollar crisis, gets fired. She's working in HR for a retail chain in Colorado Springs now. That's unfortunate for her. But consequence of decisions, not bad luck. James nodded. I learned something from watching how you handled it. You never got emotional, never sent angry emails, never made threats. You just withdrew cooperation and let natural consequences develop. My father taught me that strategic patience is more effective than emotional reactions. If you have the leverage, you don't need the threats. You just wait for the other party to understand reality. Your father would be proud of how you handled it. I think he would have appreciated the precision of it, the methodical preparation, the strategic patience that waited until exactly the right moment to demonstrate what happens when policy enforcement encounters operational reality built by someone who understood how vulnerable the systems were. We talked for another 20 minutes about industry developments, then went to separate sessions. I didn't think about James or Meridian or Sandra Bishop again for months. That chapter was completely finished. A year after the settlement, I received a LinkedIn message from a family law attorney in Denver named Patricia Rodriguez. Mr. Harmon, I'm representing a client in a workplace dispute involving bereavement leave denial. I've heard your story through professional networks and would like to discuss whether you'd be willing to serve as expert witness about business continuity risks created by poor employee management during personal crises. Compensation for your time, of course. I agreed to consult, and Patricia's case involved a senior IT administrator who had been terminated for taking extended leave after his wife's death. The company claimed job abandonment. The administrator argued wrongful termination for exercising basic bereavement rights. Your Meridian situation is exactly analogous, Patricia explained during our consultation. Employee with critical system access. Denied reasonable accommodation during family tragedy. Company faces consequences when employee withdraws cooperation. The difference is, my client was actually fired rather than resigning strategically. What outcome are you seeking? Reinstatement with back pay or substantial settlement if he doesn't want to return? Your case demonstrates what happens when companies treat critical employees poorly during personal crisis. They face operational consequences that far exceed the cost of just showing basic human decency. I provided expert testimony about business continuity risks and strategic employee management. The case settled for $320,000, and the company implemented new bereavement leave policies that provided flexible accommodation rather than rigid policy enforcement. Your testimony was crucial, Patricia told me after the settlement. The company understood that treating critical employees badly during personal tragedy creates risks far beyond individual wrongful termination claims. They revised policies company-wide to prevent future situations. The consulting work generated additional opportunities. I became go-to expert witness for cases involving employee access to critical business systems and management decisions that created operational vulnerabilities. The work paid well and served useful purpose, helping companies understand that business continuity and human decency are complementary rather than competing priorities. My father had been dead for 14 months when I finally returned to the cemetery in Milwaukee where he was buried. I brought flowers and stood by his grave thinking about the lessons he had taught me that had proved their value in ways I never anticipated. Precision matters. Proper planning prevents problems. Documentation beats testimony. Strategic patience defeats emotional reaction. And sometimes the best response to threats is demonstrating exactly what those threats cost when directed at the wrong person with the right leverage. Thanks, Dad, I said quietly. You taught me to do things correctly rather than quickly, to prepare properly, to document everything, to think strategically rather than react emotionally. All of that mattered when Sandra Bishop told me to deliver work, or I was done. The preparation you taught me turned 5 words into $150,000 in consulting fees, full severance, and her termination. I think you would have appreciated the precision of it. I stood there for a while longer, then drove back to Denver to continue building contract infrastructure properly at Silverton Technologies, where succession planning and human decency existed from day one rather than being expensive lessons learned through operational crisis. 2 years after the settlement, Meridian Solutions reached out through Richard Dalton, asking if I would consult on their contract infrastructure upgrade. They were implementing new enterprise resource planning software and needed someone who understood their existing systems to plan the migration. "Philip, I know we parted under difficult circumstances," Richard said during our initial call, "but you built our contract infrastructure, and you're the best person to advise on modernizing it. Would you consider consulting work? We'd pay your standard rate plus premium for the expertise." I agreed to consult at $500 per hour. Not because I had forgiven the situation, but because the work was interesting and the compensation was excellent. During my first week consulting at Meridian, several employees approached me privately. "Philip, you're a legend here," was typical conversation. "Standing up to Sandra Bishop, walking away on your terms, getting paid to fix the mess. That's everyone's fantasy." It wasn't fantasy. It was consequence of strategic preparation meeting catastrophically poor judgment. Still, you proved that employees with leverage shouldn't accept bad treatment just because management demands it. The observation was accurate but incomplete. I hadn't proved that employees should use leverage aggressively. I had proved that companies should treat employees decently, because creating resentment in people who control critical systems produces outcomes far more expensive than just showing basic human decency would have cost. The consulting work at Meridian continued for 6 months. I helped them implement proper contract infrastructure with redundant access, documented procedures, and business continuity protocols that ensured no single person could create operational crisis by withdrawing cooperation. "This is what we should have built 12 years ago when you started recommending it," James Mitchell observed during one of our working sessions. "Yes, but you built it now. Better late than never. And the expensive lesson probably ensures you'll maintain it properly going forward. The story of what happened is part of our onboarding now. New employees learn about the time we concentrated critical access in one person, treated him badly during personal tragedy, and paid $150,000 to fix the crisis we created. It's cautionary tale about business continuity and human resources management. Good. If my experience prevents other companies from making the same mistakes, something positive came from it, beyond my settlement payment. The consulting work concluded in March. Meridian's new contract infrastructure was properly designed with distributed access and documented procedures. The company had learned expensive lessons about business continuity, human judgment, and the cost of threatening critical employees during personal crises. I continued working at Silverton Technologies, building systems properly from the start, and ensuring no single person controlled operational continuity. The revenge tale that started with Sandra Bishop's 5 words had become case study about business continuity, strategic patience, and the importance of treating employees with basic human decency, especially when those employees control systems the company cannot operate without. Have you ever experienced workplace situations where management's poor judgment created consequences far more expensive than basic decency would have cost? The lesson from my Meridian experience is simple. People who control critical business systems should be treated well, not because they deserve special accommodation, but because creating resentment in people with leverage produces outcomes nobody wants. Sandra Bishop learned that lesson through career-ending consequences. Meridian Solutions learned it through $150,000 in settlements, plus operational crisis that threatened client relationships. And I learned that strategic preparation, systematic documentation, and patience let you walk away from bad situations on your terms rather than theirs. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button to Revenge Tales with Luke. Share your experiences with workplace conflicts, strategic responses to poor management, and the importance of proper business continuity planning. See you in our next story.